Ladies and gentlemen, Adam Posner just got finished with this podcast. It's a fire episode. If you guys are interested in his story of how he worked for Vayner Media, got fired, and took that, spun it into a positive, pivoted careers from digital advertising into recruiting. So we talk all about his journey, talk about recruiting, and just overall, just had a great conversation. Very fun, very cool guy. I think you guys will enjoy this podcast episode. Let me know what you guys think and enjoy the podcast. Thanks again.
How's that?
That's good. There we go.
Oh, it's a mute button. The big red one's a mute button. Hold on. I'm shooting in my bedroom because I was going to go to my office space, but I had to be home, take my kid. They're having a roller skating event at their school at the roller rink today. Should be fun.
Awesome. So what's happening, man? Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Yeah. Cool, man. Just adjusting my bedroom office setup over here. Thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
So we just, we jumped on the phone last week, and you were telling me a little bit about your story, which I find fascinating. And I think that the audience will love hearing your story of, working for Gary V. But I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you share that with us. So thank you, man.
Hold on 1 second. Meant to shut that off before. Sorry about that, man.
All right, no problem.
All right, nothing like real-time audio and video. Well, cool, man. Thank you again. I certainly appreciate you, having me on. We, as you mentioned, we connected. Lots of synergy happening here on LinkedIn, and I think that we're in that wild west, right? The new frontier, right? We're the early adopters, and first and foremost, it's incredible to see the amount of genuine, authentic content and content creators on the platform, and it's quite inspiring. So thank you so much for being at the forefront of that. Yeah, my story, short and sweet. Born and raised New Yorker, right? Like something I definitely take a lot of pride in. And coming out of school, I knew I wanted to get into advertising and marketing. It was something, it was in my blood, right? Always selling, always hustling, always kind of, just trying to put myself out there. And then, after school, it's logical, right? Like, I want to get into marketing and advertising. And I jumped in, worked at a couple of different ad agencies, got my feet wet, paid my dues here in New York. And then SiriusXM came calling. And that was pretty cool, man. That was about a year into Howard Stern's first contract, right? And
nice.
You a Howard fan?
Yeah, I remember that. And that's why my mom got the SiriusXM back in the day, is because he moved over to satellite radio.
Yeah, and talk about the Wild West, right? I mean, that place was insane. I mean, it was attracting talent from all over the world and giving them a brand new platform and a brand new canvas to spread their message to new audiences, and that was incredible. So it was working on building audiences, building new markets for satellite radio, which was pretty cool. And from there, I kind of took a left-hand turn and I went to American Express. It was an opportunity that came my way, and I was like, hey, how can I say no to Amex, right? Fortune, was a Fortune 500 company. And Amex was interesting, man. I was going from the Wild West to the buttoned up, suit and tie kind of culture over there, which is a little bit of a shock, right? Kind of like jumping into an ice bath, right, so to speak. Pretty buttoned up. But the cool thing about Amex is, right, a couple things. One, best in class onboarding, training, and really just making sure that new employees are brought in and brought into success, right? Set up for success, which I think is critical in any organization, right? For retention and just overall employee satisfaction. But I soon realized that that suit and tie culture wasn't for me, and I jumped back into advertising. So I jumped around a couple different ad agencies, a couple of smaller shops, and at that time, social media exploding. Vaynerchuck was on the scene, being a real true influencer, and I knew I wanted to work for him. And it was interesting. I went through a first round of interviews. And, they really liked me. Everything was great. But at the time, they didn't have an open position. So I took a job with another agency, and I was there for about 6 months. And then, Vayner Media came calling, and, and I answered. And, it was the ultimate holy grail for me, right? I landed there. I was awesome. I was like, this is going to be fantastic. Again, so I jumped right in, man. And day one was crazy. I mean, back then we were in the old building, and people were like, what was it like to work there? It was kind of, like working inside of a beehive, right? Like literally working inside of a beehive. And here's some crazy shit. Nobody, aside from the creative and I think the project managers, had assigned seats, right?
Wow.
So every morning when you came in, you had like a locker, like high school, right? So every morning when you came in, you had to kind of scramble and try to get the best seat, but you knew like certain people had certain seats, right? It was like gangs and like territorial. No, it really wasn't.
That's cool. That's interesting.
So Vayner was an interesting experience, right? It was a new way of working, right? Working in very, large fluid teams, and to kind of cut to the chase, right? 6 months in, I didn't bring my A game, man. I had some, things going on in my life. I had some distractions, and I let that get the better of me, right? And my performance wasn't up to par, and I lost my job there. And it sucked. It sucked pretty bad.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was a rough one. That was tough. That was, having to face the music, and I think that, I think it's safe to say that many of us have been fired before in our life, right? And I think when it does, it humbles you, right? And it causes you to reflect, and sometimes at first, you want to blame other people, right? Instead of blaming yourself. And for me, it was a balance of that. There was a lot of anger. I was mad at some external factors, right? There was some politics and some other BS going around, but ultimately the responsibility was on me, right? For me to chart my own course and choose my path, and I failed, right? And it wasn't because I just didn't deliver what they brought me on board to do. And
What did they bring you on board to do?
yeah, it was to lead pieces of business, right? To bring strategy to my clients and execute. And I didn't do a great job of that, right? I didn't bring my A game, and it took me a while to own up to that, right? But the part that really was the hardest was, saying what's next, right? What am I going to do? I was 30, 35 at the time, just bought a house. My daughter was 3 at the time. I think we chatted about this earlier. And
Wow.
it's those moments in life, man, where you have to reflect and say, this is a critical inflection point, right? Am I going to continue down the path of repeating the same mistakes and doing something that I hate? And you know what? Maybe I'm not that good at it, right? Maybe it's just not right for me. And that was tough. And the day that I lost my job, I had a really long conversation with Gary, and we talked about, life and not the meaning of life, but like life, where I'm at in this world, and what's kind of next for me. And he said something so critical, and he's like, dude, you got to stop sucking, stop focusing on the stuff that you suck at, man. He's like, you don't got time for that. He's just focus down on your strengths. And he looked over at me and he's like, well, what are your strengths? And I'm like, what we're doing right now, the ability to connect people, and just my overall knowledge of New York and the network. And he's like, well, what are you going to do with that? And it's funny, I kind of like shook my head. And I remember I was going out with one of my buddies a couple of weeks ago who works in finance recruiting. I did some healthcare recruiting. He's like, dude, you should always been a recruiter. You'd be killing it by now. You'd be amazing at it. And I said to Gary, I'm like, dude, I think I'm going to try out recruiting. And he looked over and he's like, that sounds pretty good, man. He's like, give it a shot. And, with that, we shook hands. He said, I'll, help you out as best I can, and I moved on to recruiting, and that was the start of, the next chapter of my life.
Dude, that's amazing. That's something that really kind of stuck out about your story was that, being in a, negative kind of situation, getting fired, and, you could be like resentful, but like Gary helped you out. He talked to you, and, you were saying that he, would give you a recommendation, and, like to double down on what you're good at and not focus on what you suck at. And, yeah, man, that's like, you could have took that situation two ways. You could have just, had that been like the end of your story and the thing that really killed you, getting to this high point in, digital marketing and advertising, working for the man himself, and, Vayner Media. But then you lost all that. You could have took that negatively, or like you did, you took that positively, and you're like, you know what, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this wasn't meant for me, and maybe I need to focus on what could be instead of what has been.
Yeah, that's a tremendous point, but that didn't come right away, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like some like PTSD, right? Like you're in shock. I mean, I remember walking out the door that day, and what went across my head, the first thing was, how am I going to tell my wife?
Wow.
Right? Like, I mean, luckily for me, I mean, she's my rock. I mean, she supports me. I knew that she was going to have my back no matter what, but there was a level of disappointment, right?
Yeah.
And then there was a level of, what am I going to do next, right? I can't go back and do the same thing, right? And it's funny, you look back on things that happen in your life, and some of the worst points of your life set you up for the future and set you up for the best. But you don't know that at the time, obviously, right? And that's what happened. But, those couple of days, those first few weeks right afterwards were dark periods for me, man. They were scary. Right. Because, how was I going to go back to agency life? Was I going to start interviewing again at other ad agencies for account management? What was my story? What was I going to tell them? Right.
Yeah.
Hey, I work for Vayner and I got fired because I fucking sucked. Like, that's not going to fly. Right. And it wasn't even just that. It was digging in deeper and thinking about what I wanted to do in my life. And the other interesting part too, and you'll probably, have some thoughts on this as a young father, right? Once you have a kid, everything changes, right? You're not just looking out for yourself. So for me, I was thinking long-term. I was like, I need to put myself in a position to make more money, right? I need to put myself in a position where I'm not limited by a set salary. And recruiting gave me that opportunity, right? I knew I wasn't going to go into straight sales. Recruiting was my calling, man. And once again, jumped in feet first.
I love it. Yeah. So tell us, like, what was your darkest moment? Like after that, like where was your head at? Like, what were you thinking? And maybe from the perspective of someone that maybe in a similar position, or maybe they haven't gone through that yet, but they're sensing that dread of, like, I mean, when you're not at your A game, like, it, you probably knew like something was coming down, and you're like, what am I going to do?
You do know it, and anyone who doesn't know it, there's either a lack of self-awareness, or your head's just in the clouds, right? I think any professional, I think when you're not bringing your A game. I think you sense it. Listen, this didn't come out of nowhere. There was conversations, there was performance reviews. In the back of my head, I thought that we were going to be able to salvage this, right? But ultimately, the chemistry wasn't there, and I was kicking myself. Monday morning quarterback, right? You can look back and say, I could have done this differently, I could have done that. And now Monday morning quarterback, and it, almost 4 years later, I'm like, thank God that happened, right? Like, because that's my story, that's my origin story, right? And that's what's giving me my superpowers, right? Because I've always had it in me, right? I've always been a connector, whether it be professionally, personally, connecting friends, connecting colleagues, but losing my job and going into recruiting brought that superpower out of me, man. Right. Being able to be that connector, being able to see opportunities that some people don't. And honestly, man, being able to monetize it, right. Being able to make a living off it. And that's what I'm doing now. But going back to your, original point that, those dark moments came in two ways. One, thinking, practical, like, how am I going to pay my bills? Am I going to, foreclose on my house? Right. We just put all our eggs in one basket, literally, right? Am I going to lose a house that we just bought a few months ago? And that's scary, man.
Yeah.
Right. How am I going to take care? How am I going to take care of my family? And those are real thoughts. And, I was thinking crazy things. I'm like, oh, maybe I should go work, go work at Home Depot, go work at, Best Buy. Like, not that it's crazy, but like, what am I going to do in the meantime? And the days were hard. The days were hard and long, not going to work every day, sitting at home alone. And it's different, in between other jobs or the career searches, you spend that time looking for a job. And now is at the point thinking, what am I going to do with my career as a whole? Right. And I put that time to work for me. Right. I turned it around. I said, you know what, babe? I said to my wife, I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump into recruiting. And I reached out to every recruiter I knew. I said, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? Just want to pick your brain. And it's so funny. A bunch of them like, don't do it. It's crazy. But they told me the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The operational elements, the ups, the downs, the financial elements of it. And I did it. Yeah. And now we're chatting today, man.
Yeah. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. Like, dive into recruiting, like what makes a good recruiter? How would someone know it's for them? What does your day-to-day look like? And I'd love to know more. Yeah.
Yeah. So first things first, when it comes to recruiting, you got to have thick skin. Right. And I think that's first and foremost, right? You got to be able to take more punches than the other guy. Right. And it's kind of like baseball, right? Because in recruiting, right, say you close 30% of the deals, like equating to batting like 300 in baseball, you're killing it, man. You're a Hall of Famer. You're a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? And that's a good living. So first and foremost, you have to have thick skin. Second, you cannot be afraid to pick up the phone and talk to anybody, right? And it's kind of like speed dating. I always tell my wife I have like 30 blind dates a day, right? Chatting with guys, chatting with girls, it doesn't matter, right? You're on the phone, you're talking to people, you have to, be on point. But the most important point about recruiting is really relationships, right? Being able to leverage the relationships that you have, whether it be reaching out for biz dev or reaching out to candidates. Your reputation is built on your relationships, right? Your reputation is everything in recruiting, just like other professions. And I'll equate it to lawyers, right? Like, everyone stereotypes lawyers as being sharks and everything. And that's the exception, right? There's a lot of us good recruiters out there, and it's those bad ones that give us good ones, a bad name for the industry. But we're the ones that care about our candidates, right? We care about their career. We're not just trying to place them to make some money. We want people to be happy, right? Because if someone goes into a job and they're gone in 60 days, we're not getting paid, right? We lose our money. So what's the point of that, right? And for our clients, it's that trust factor, right? We want to be seen as trusted advisors to them, right? Understanding their business, understanding the type of candidates that they want to see, and not just their hard skills, but their soft skills, right? Culturally, are they going to fit in, right? Or not just fit in, but are they going to be a complementary piece to the organization? And I think those are key elements to recruiting.
Right. So some of the, actually fun story, before I was at the job I was at before I went into full-time, doing LinkedIn creation and what I'm doing now, that job before I actually was placed into by a recruiter. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't the first opportunity that, I had talked to about the recruiter for. But it wasn't until like 6 months later, he had another opportunity that I was actually the perfect candidate for. It's like a water, wastewater job for system integration in LA. And I was like the perfect candidate. So I built that relationship with him over time. We talked a few times, and, he didn't really try to slam any job down my throat, which was nice. Like, he got to know me, and, it kind of really changed my mind about recruiters. I kind of always had maybe it's the fault of some shady recruiters out there.
Used car salesman.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I kind of opened my mind up to that. I'm like, you know what, let me just talk to this guy. And, he put me into that job, and I was actually like the perfect candidate for that job. But unfortunately, the culture, like that job, the company wasn't a perfect culture fit for me. So after a year, that's when things kind of split into two ways. Like, my interests were going this way. And, I felt like that same kind of dread, like I wasn't performing well, even, just because I could do the work. Like, if I wasn't in an environment that wasn't, happy in, and driving 3 hours a day. So
exactly,
but that wasn't necessarily the fault of the recruiter. Like, I thank the guy for getting me that opportunity, which led me to my next one. And so it was pretty interesting.
That's the other piece about recruiting as well, right? We're career coaches, we're psychologists, we're counselors, because, in the decision tree of life, right? Next to your relationships, your personal relationships, your career is right up there, right? And making those type of decisions. And, talking to people about making a change, right? Especially when someone's happy in a job, right? And I always tell this in recruiting: clients aren't paying me to find unhappy people, right? They want people who are happy in their jobs, right? And that takes some effort too, right? And it's about understanding motivations, right? What are you not getting in your current job that you could potentially get elsewhere? We're not just talking about monetary, right? We're not just talking about making more money. It could be about, anything, right? And I think understanding those motivations is what separates good recruiters from bad recruiters.
So why don't we maybe talk about some of the ugly truths of recruiting, or maybe debunk some of the myths about recruiting, because, there's this idea of like a conflict of interest between, the client, the company who's paying you, versus your other client, which is the employee. Mm-hmm. And you're really like a matchmaker. They're both your clients, but, there's like some back and forth as far as, who are you trying to get the salary lower? Are you trying to get the salary higher? Are you trying to find a happy middle ground? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So there's two schools of thought to this. Ultimately, right, if you want to think pretty finite, the clients, whether it be the agency, the brand, the organization, they're the ones paying my bills. They're the ones paying my fees. So you want to be looking out for their best interest, right? They have budgets, they have certain things that they're looking for. Now, on the flip side, as you mentioned before, it's the candidate, right? And, something I pride myself on is really having those solid relationships with my candidates, and it really is a balancing act, right? And I think that's, people think our job is easy, right? People think we just go on LinkedIn, we reach out to everybody, right? And we just find someone, send them over, and they get the job. It's not that easy. The life cycle, the sales cycle, so to speak, between my first interaction with the candidate and getting them to start day one, it's a long period of time. I mean, on the short end, it could, I've had people in roles within like 30 days. And sometimes, especially as you go up the ladder in seniority, I mean, it's, a courting period for a VP could take 6-7 months. I mean, people have families, people have, legal non-competes. They have other issues as well, not to get too deep into the weeds there. But it's not as easy as people think. And it's one of those things too, where not everyone can do it. Right.
So what are some of the positions that you are best hired to find? Like, what are you, do you call yourself a headhunter, by the way? Like, is that a bad?
I consider myself a headhunter when I need to, put a dart in someone's neck and drag them to a job. No, headhunter is cool, right? I consider myself sometimes a hunter, a gatherer, a farmer when I'm planting my seeds, right? A harvester, right? I put on a different hat each time, but I'm cultivating. I'm ultimately cultivating relationships. And there's times when I got to go pick the crops, and there's times when I got to bring them to market, right? And that's the analogy I like to use. Sometimes I throw around talent acquisition, professional, consultant, but ultimately I'm a matchmaker, man. I mean, you said it before, right? We're connecting opportunities, right? We're connecting an opportunity with someone who's looking for one, right? And that's really, what it comes down to.
So what are those best, like, what are some of those opportunities? Anything, marketing,
good question,
VP?
So
I always give like 3-4 questions in one.
No, and I just got to remember them. It really depends. So I work 2 different sides, right? Which is pretty unique. And ultimately everything I do is in the marketing, digital marketing and advertising realm. I work with brands, I work with agencies, and I work with startups, right? So sometimes I'm working in-house for an agency where they hire me as a consultant to come in and be an extension of their talent acquisition team. And then in other cases, more traditional recruiting, I'm going out as a contingency recruiter, and companies pay me a fee for finding them a candidate to fit their bill. So I do everything in the digital marketing realm, from account management, strategy, creative, UI, UX, and the latest and greatest hot field right now is performance marketing. So that's paid social, paid search, growth hacking, so to speak.
So tell me a little bit about that, because I've never heard it called performance marketing. Like,
performance media, right? Performance media, right? So that's paid search, SEO, SEM, any paid media efforts that's driving a direct response action, right? You want the end user to do something. You're clicking on a link, you're subscribing to something, you're clicking through to a landing page. That's all performance marketing.
Do you know anyone who's like into the influencer marketing kind of connector, broker, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's another emerging field. And I think a few years ago, Vayner, went out with a division where they were basically being like a talent agency for influencers, right? And it's pretty insane too, some of the fees that people are getting for like a single post. Have you seen American Meme yet on Netflix?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I know you have a long flight coming up to Dubai soon, which I want to talk about too, because that's freaking awesome, man. I'm jealous. Next trip, I'll come with you. I'm just inviting myself on that one. Us dads need a little getaway, right? American Meme is pretty cool. I mean, it really tells the story of influencer marketing, starting back with the originator, Paris Hilton, and working their way through to where we are now. It's pretty awesome. Definitely check that out on your flight.
Okay. Yeah. What other good movies you got?
Movies, man. I mean, we're a little behind on the movies. We're in TV mode right now. What did we just finish? Well, Billions is coming back in a little bit. Oh my God, what did we just finish? Oh, Ray Donovan. You watch Ray Donovan?
No, I need to catch up on my pop culture.
No, Ray Donovan. What are you watching these days? I didn't do Black Mirror. I didn't do what's the Sandra Bullock one with the blindfold? We didn't get to that yet.
I don't know.
Bird Box, right? Bird Box.
Sounds familiar. I definitely like the Black Mirror episodes. I'm a technology guy, and I'm an existential kind of like big, like, high in the sky, in the cosmos type of thinker. So those really appeal to me.
You like a Mr. Robot guy?
Yeah. Or like, I love the Joe Rogan podcast, some of the physicists and like philosophers and like psychiatrists that he has on there. It's like
Did
pretty
he get
interesting.
Kanye yet? I know he's trying to get. I know Kanye is going to go on there. Did that happen yet? Did that go down?
I heard it's happening,
Yeah.
and I was actually watching one the other day, and one of the comments was like, every time we get a live notification that's not Kanye, we get a little disappointed because like they're just waiting for it to happen. So yeah, it's gonna happen, and that would be really cool.
So let me ask you, man. Like, what with with this podcast, right? Like, what's your intention? What's your intention? What's your message out to the universe?
Oh man, that's a good one. So, I don't know. I just kind of to be you, and I like I like sharing stories like yourself with my audience through my through my perspective, and I kind of put a little spin on it as far as like the direction that the conversation goes. I like to keep it really free form. It's kind of just complementary to my the media thing that I'm doing. I read Crushing It, and he's like, you got to start a podcast. And I'm like, oh, a podcast could be like a fun way to create content, long format, build relationships, and kind of expand your network, right? So like now, anyone who's listening to my podcast and is, or searching for like a recruiter podcast, boom, there they are. So like we're
Yeah,
both helping each other
I
out, so
love it,
that's
man.
really cool. I don't know. I don't really have. I've done some sponsored spots. I don't know. Like it really kind of is like the Joe Rogan podcast in that
Right.
it's like free form, any type of guest, and really kind of random conversations. Like I don't typically do like a question list unless the guest feels more comfortable with that. I'll send them some questions and then kind of take it from there.
So yeah, man, I feel the same way, and that's kind of the way I conduct my interviews with candidates, right? I kind of have like a rough idea when I get someone on the phone. I mean, if I'm talking to you on the phone about a specific position, 99.9 chance I already know what you do. I took a look at your resume, so I'd rather spend that time to get to know them a little bit. And we talked about this earlier, and I'd love to get your response to this. One question I typically say for mid to senior level candidates to understand their motivation, I like to ask, what's your North Star, man? What do you look to for inspiration? What do you look to when you're down? What do you look to when things are going right? What do you look to when things are going wrong?
Yeah. So that's a great question. The North Star for me is definitely God. When things are going right, it's probably because I'm putting God first and foremost. Then Mary, then my daughter, and then everything else. Right. Job being pretty much right up there with those. But man, like there's been times over the last year where maybe God, Mary, Zoe, maybe they took a backseat because I was just that. I got distracted or I got super engaged. I kind of have like this all obsessive interest and focus, and it's kind of a super skill, but it's also kind of a hindrance. Man, I was like traveling like way too much, and I told you my fiance is a flight attendant for American Airlines, so I can fly pretty much anywhere for free, and I
Yeah,
was like doing that. Like I would find out about a conference like on the East Coast, and then I would be there like the next day,
just
like
do it.
and that man that put like my relationship kind of got to a point where like it was very like there's a really high chance that like I should not even still be with my fiance. Things have kind of taken a turn for the better. Like this year was doing a lot better,
Good to hear,
but there
man.
was a time like late last year like where man it impacted me, and when that's happening, like you're not yourself on, like I can't do a video when I'm like stressed out about my fiance being upset about me about and Gary talks about this too, like it's such a hard fucking thing because he's like, you need to be doing 12 to 16 hours a day, you need to be in the comments. And so like I was always on LinkedIn, and she's like, you love your phone more than you love me, and
Dude, my wife's gonna hear this and she's gonna be like, "That's Adam too. He doesn't put his freaking phone down."
it's tough, man. So definitely I find that like that's why God's my North Star, right? Because kind of having faith in the process. I mean, I wouldn't have had confidence quitting my other job to try this out if it wasn't for my faith in God, knowing that everything would be okay, and also for like kind of reading Crushing It and realizing that you know, it is a possibility that that could happen, and to not separate yourself from your own dreams, because then for sure they're not going to happen, you know, if you think they're impossible.
That's incredible, man. And I think that's certainly admirable. Faith is strong, right? And whatever you believe in, whatever God believe in, whatever higher power you believe in, it's having that North Star. You know, for me, you know, it's my kids and it's my wife, and it's making sure that they're in a good place, right?
Yeah.
And making sure, and that drives everything I do for success. You know, looking back for me, you know, it's funny. I'm like, well, what if this happened? What if I got fired and I was single? Like, I would have run off to Bali and hang out with spider monkeys, right? Like, what, right? Like, what are you going to do? And, you know, you have that structure and you have that higher purpose and, you know, that higher calling. And that's it for me, right? Like, you know, whenever I'm down, and recruiting's a grind, man. Recruiting is a grind, right? It's a long process, and there's ups and downs, and there's a lot of losses. There's a lot more losses than wins in recruiting. And you have to be okay with your losses, and you have to own your losses and move on from them. And that was one of the hardest things for me when I started recruiting, right? Like, you know, you spend all this time trying to get someone in a position, and then say the offer goes to somebody else, or whatever, 1,000 million reasons, you know, an offer or a deal falls through, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you're okay to be upset about it until you go to bed. But the next morning you wake up, you got to shake it off, and you got to move on.
So, gosh, man. Yeah, man, things are really looking good though this year. Like, I don't know, I just, you know, honestly, a big thing was me starting doing a little bit of freelancing on Upwork. So now, you know, I was an engineer and I was making, you know, really good income. And then I went into media, had no idea really what I was doing. Didn't have a huge, massive following that I could, you know, just put out an ad and make a lot of money. Like I was doing small little bits, just kind of proving the concept, doing small video shoots, doing, you know, picking up 1 or 2 clients that on a retainer basis and kind of building on that success. But I really had to like learn the ropes and cut my teeth on it. So like there was a time where like we were just barely making ends meet. Like it's funny because we didn't have any debt. Like we did the Dave Ramsey program and, you know, so we cut all of our expenses down and we paid off all of our debt before this happened. So that was definitely something that made it possible. But at the same time, we didn't have a whole lot of savings either. So, you know, you can imagine that's like going down the freeway with like being towed behind a car with like your skin just running against the pavement. Like, yeah, you're making it there, but it's a rough ride along the way.
I hear
that
you,
abrasion. Man. So now I'm doing that freelancing. So I'm monetizing my engineering skills again on Upwork. And it's cool because industrial automation has typically been a slower industry to change. And so there's not very large presence on there. And so now I have like a, you know, multiple sources of income. So, you know, it's making the wife happy that, you know, more money's in the account, more is coming in than it's going out. Right. That's always a good thing. And
it's not even taking the side hustle, right? It's multiple lines coming in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I was making ends meet with just the media, but now I'm like, you know, able to save and invest back into my business more. Like I just bought a $1,000 wireless mic system for Dubai.
Nice.
And, you know, it's like probably more than what I need right now, but that's something that's going to be like usable for 5 years, right? Probably longer than the camera. So,
but you're investing into your business, right? You're investing into, you know, it's a high quality, right? So you're investing into it now. You're going to have a higher quality output. Your media is going to have a higher quality output. And in turn, that's going to generate more business for you because your product is better.
Yeah.
Right. That's the mindset, right?
Yeah. I mean, I started with my phone. I didn't have a professional camera. I didn't have a professional mic. So I built up and, you know, it's always like you kind of got to push yourself outside. You got to step into bigger shoes and then fill them. So I think it'll be really cool being at Dubai. I'm going to bring my suit and just kind of, you know, step my game up a little bit.
Yeah, man.
Even though it's a little bit, my brand is kind of like always a little bit more relaxed and casual, but I really want to just push myself and people will be like, damn, look at how crispy Zach's video is and how sexy the audio sounds. Cause
this and how nice his suit is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, and then that'll lead into the next opportunity of getting more paid conference, you know, sponsors and more media coverage. And then
that's the right approach.
More, you know, client work and
it's good.
Funny enough, one of my clients on Upwork actually found me through one of my YouTube videos, you know, with the software platform that I work with. And So it goes to show like this, this stuff really does work, that you kind of build that personal brand online. You can't just go out there and just, make a Fiverr profile, let's say, and then not have any credibility online. Like, you got to drive traffic to it yourself,
It's got to be a multifaceted approach. It's always so interesting to hear, how Vaynerchuck's stories have actually like inspired people, right? Like in the real practical, and people are always asking me, what it was like to work for him, and I give a couple of stories. I wasn't there that long, right? But my interactions, were real, and we had some great exposure. And the one thing I always tell everybody, I mean, he doesn't need me to defend him, but he's a real deal, man. I mean, he practices what he preaches. And the other really important thing too, he doesn't expect you to work 16-hour days. If you do, you do. He wants you to do you. You do what works for you best to achieve the results where you want to be. Something that may work for him may not work for you, and vice versa. Right. And I think that's another critical takeaway. He gives people the tools, right? He gives you the blueprint, he gives you the mindset, and then, go for it, man. That's really what he says to do.
So something that's kind of interesting, that's kind of not been on my mind all the time, but it's come up a lot, and rereading Crushing It, like, kind of confirmed in my mind. It's like, most people are selfish, right? Like, he has CEOs ask him, how do I get my business employees to care about my business as much as I do? And he's like, they're fucking not going to, right? But no, like the mix between like self-motivation and altruistic motivation, right? Like, Gary is like self-driven in that he wants to buy the jets, but he's also altruistic in that he's like, the employees should do themselves, and I want to just genuinely help and care people. So, like, how do you account and reconcile those two things? Like, I've heard I think it was in that book, it was like, as long as you're 51% altruistic and like 49% selfish, then like you'll do good things.
The needle just has to tip a little bit more.
Yeah. And like, you could, like, some people try to like optimize their altruism, and like people kind of see through that, or like
it's a balance. Yeah, I think it's about being authentic, and that's another piece of my story now as a content creator. I'm trying to figure out a few things. One, I'm trying to figure out my voice, right? In the beginning, right now, these beginning stages, having amazing opportunities with folks like yourself to tell my story, to establish myself, establish my credibility, establish what I'm looking to do. And second, what's my point of view, right? What's my point of view on recruitment, on talent, and on life, and just owning it and defining that voice. And having platforms like this really gives me that opportunity. So thank you, man.
Yeah. How are you leveraging LinkedIn to build your business? How does that work?
When did you start? LinkedIn is my world.
When did you start posting
LinkedIn?
videos?
It's funny. My first video I actually posted right before the holidays, right? And I wasn't planning on posting that specific video. A friend of ours lost his battle to cancer, and I was in his hospital room a couple of days before, and I walked out, and I wasn't planning on putting a video out, but I felt so inclined. It was right before the holidays, just to tell people, like, just take a step back, right? Like, it's not all about work. Like, take a step back and just remember what's important to you, right? It's not all about work. We have one life. Take a minute to spend time this holiday with friends and family. Don't be looking at your phone. Don't be thinking about work, right? It's going to be there. Work is never going away. It's always going to be there. Like, spend this time with your family, because you never know how long it's going to be. And that was my first video, and I wasn't trying to get like likes or any of that bullshit. I just wanted to get that message out there. And then I started putting out some videos after the break, taking some advice from folks like yourself and some of the other great content creators that are out there. And it's going to be a process. Like, I put a video out 2 days ago. The lighting sucked on it, but I don't care, because the message is great, right? But what they started to do was, like, in the middle of the night, I take my phone and I take the memo section. And I start to write little notes to myself. Like, all right, I want to do a video on this. I want to do a video on that. And I start to flesh them out in my head, what I want to be doing. But LinkedIn for me, I mean, if you're not on video right now, and if you're not putting content out on LinkedIn, you're going to get lost in the shuffle, unless you just want to be a lurker. But if your business relies on LinkedIn, you have to be involved on it. It is fire right now. It is the wild, wild west. It's like the early days, of Facebook and Insta. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. people can't be putting content out for the sake of content, right? So I'm trying to be very mindful of the message I'm putting out there because I want to add value, right? I want to add that unique point of view. I'm seeing a lot of regurgitated content, right? Where people are taking themes and stories from other people, whether it be in print, whether it be in video, and using that for their own. And like Gary talks about it too. Are you going to be a creator or are you going to be a DJ? Are you DJing other people's content or are you creating it yourself, right? And I guess it's okay to be a creator if a DJ if you own up to it, right? If you want to mix up other people's content. But if you're going to be a creator, it has to be original and it has to add value. And I'm learning that quickly. And I'm also trying to figure out my approach, my style, right? I might be investing into some technology as well pretty soon.
Nice.
Always, I got this microphone, using it for the first time.
Yeah, it sounds good, man.
Yeah, well, Yeti action.
So, yeah, that's one thing that I've always been in a learning process about figuring out, finding my voice. I mean, video, iterating over that and trying different things has helped me find where my sweet spot is, what I'm passionate about, and trying different ways of monetization. So it's very cool. It's very interesting. I'm excited to be able to follow your journey and kind of be capturing it at this moment in time. And
we're going to look back on this in a year from now, right? And it's funny too. I mean, I have this weird feeling. It's like I need to keep my foot on the gas at all times, because if I take my foot off the gas, you know, that attention meter is going to go down, right? Yeah. And I'm enjoying it too. I'm enjoying the conversations, and more importantly, as a recruiter, you know, my job is relationships. So I'm really enjoying connecting with more people and having conversations, and not just conversations that can make me money, right? But I'm having conversations with lots of folks to connect and learn about them and help them in their career and kind of give back a little bit. But we're also connecting offline, right? We're doing a lot more meetups, a lot more networking events, which I think are absolutely incredible to take the online offline, right? To further those relationships. And in New York, I mean, it's taken the whole meetup thing to an absolutely new level. It's incredible.
You've been to one of the LinkedIn local New Yorks?
No, I haven't been to the LinkedIn local one, but there's a couple of really cool influencers here in the marketing advertising space that are gathering folks on LinkedIn, bringing them together and creating an offline event.
Yeah, you want to shout anyone out that?
Yeah, I'm sure Kelvin Joseph, Cool Kel, former CMO of Steiner Sports. He's absolutely killing it right now. We did an incredible one last Thursday over at Creative Drive. I think he had like 60 or 70 folks there. You know, got to meet the CMO and some other folks there. So if you think about it from a biz dev perspective, it's not just a cold call, right? And that's the other piece too. You're taking the cold out of the call, right? You're making them warm leads. You're making them natural connections, right? You're making them, you know, a relationship, right? And you see that on LinkedIn too. I think the people that are failing are the ones that are just spraying and praying with, you know, reaching out for connections, and then a second later you get a sales message. That's irrelevant, like an irrelevant sales message.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't robo spam me. Like,
what are some of your hobbies?
Hobbies. Yeah. So I before kids, I used to have hobbies. But which is really cool is, so I have a 6-year-old and, you know, a 6-month-old. And I wouldn't even call it a hobby. My hobby is spending time with them, but doing their hobbies, right? I grew up playing Legos. Legos are my favorite thing in the entire universe. And for 30 years, my Legos were, for 20 years, my Legos were boxed up in storage. And a couple of years ago, you know, I dusted them off, all my old Legos. We're talking about the little ones, not the Duplo ones. And my daughter just absolutely loves them. And we spend, you know, Sunday mornings or on the weekend, you know, if it's rain or anything, downstairs in the basement. And we built a whole crazy Lego village with my old Legos. So I'm taking them out of the box and I'm reliving my childhood. It's incredible, right? I'm like, oh my God, I remember building this toy and playing with it. And then we're combining it with the new Legos. I don't know if you've seen the new wave Legos. They're incredible, like what they've done with Legos. Yeah. And we kind of morphed these sets into this hybrid kind of retro new world, old world Legos. So hobbies for me, I brought it back. And now my daughter's hobby is my hobby. And the other fun one, how old's your daughter?
She's 2.5.
So you're not in the slime phase yet, right? Like creating slime, this whole slime craze?
No, I haven't found that one yet.
I think it's an incredible marketing plan by Elmer's Glue, because the core ingredient of slime is glue, right? Uh-huh. And I mean, Elmer's stock, I mean, I wish I invested more in it, you know, a year ago, but every kid is making slime, right? It's a combination of glue and some other, you know, common safe household things. And kids are making, but the thing is they're playing, right? Instead of just, you know, heads down on the iPad and phone all day.
That's cool. Yeah, my daughter and I, we would go hiking a lot. We kind of took a little bit of a season off. I had this backpack that like I would tote her around in,
Like
and
on behind you.
yeah, it was super legit, and we would climb mountains, man, and
Oh wow.
so, but it got to be the point where like my back would hurt at the end of the day because she was getting a little too heavy.
Right.
So I think now we're almost in that season where she can start hiking on her. I mean, she obviously was walking at the time, but now she's like really running and jumping, and so I think it'd be cool to
amazing,
get
dude.
hiking again. And she loves Duplos too, and you know the phone definitely obviously is it's a blessing and a curse too. Like I swear
It
she
is.
learns so much from it, but you know I got it. We do watch her watch time and stuff like that. So
I think that's critical, and Gary even speaks about it too, right? You know, he wants his kids to be technologically inclined, right? Because if you leave your kids off of that, right, they're going to fall behind, right?
yeah,
You know, she's taking coding classes in school, which is incredible, and she
wow,
enjoys it. And they gamified it, right? So they're teaching it via the game. I mean, but that's her language, right? We didn't have
yeah,
that then. But then I see certain things that they're not doing in school, right? Like maybe they're doing a little bit less of the, you know, the full proper cursive writing, right?
mm,
The script writing. I think some things are moving away, and I think it's just evolution, right? And changing the way we communicate, right? They're always teaching the basics, but they're also teaching. You know, the new technology and the new way that they're teaching math, like the new curriculums. I think it's fascinating. It's a lot more using words with the numbers, right? So it's a lot more problem solving than just straight up math, which I think is interesting, which changes the way that you have to think about a math problem.
yeah.
I mean, I can't. I mean, it humbles me real quick. I'm like, I can't do first grade math. What the heck?
Yeah. You know, I think kind of as we wrap this up here on a note that I think kind of really connects both of us is that like we both started our inflection point and shift in our journeys like in the middle of our like fatherhood. Like, you know, you said your daughter was 3, my daughter's like, you know, 2.5, and you know, it's never too early to start, it's never too late to start, but I think there is an I'll use a mathematical term. There's a peak, you know, there's a maximum point of difficulty, and I think it is kind of right in that early childhood phase. Like, you know, when the kids are off in college and they're on their own, you know, you have the freedom and time to kind of, you know, start up your own YouTube channel as, you know, the
Right.
grandpa tech YouTuber, or like, you know, I don't know if you see Sam Lister. You know,
Him and I are talking tomorrow morning. Crazy
nice.
LinkedIn world, right?
You know, he's like just graduated high school, and so, you know, doesn't have the responsibility of a family. And I'm not trying to downplay his thing at all. Like I really look up to him actually. And but you know, you have that freedom to be able to try different things and fail and not have to worry about it. So it's like I think that's one thing that you and I resonate with, is that despite having the obligations of a family, we took that leap to or
Yeah.
you know, leap or shove or however you want to call it, and
Combination.
yeah, to do something different.
Yeah, and it's incredible too, right? Because it's a combination. You alluded to it before. It's a combination of choice, but it also comes down to, you know, a combination of force and choice, right? Like you have to, um, and you have to do it, man. I mean, I literally went into recruiting like it was at 35 years old as day one, the same when I was 21 going into my first job, right? Like a brand new job, a brand new career, a career shift, you know, at that stage in life. And I think that takes, for anybody who's listening out there, right? You don't have to, if you don't like what you're doing, right? And you could change it, right? And there's extremes to that, right? I'm not saying like if you want to be a fucking astronaut, then go for it and go apply at NASA, right? But we're talking like, right? Hey, I'm gonna go be a Mars explorer. I'm done being a recruiter. I'm gonna go be a Mars explorer. No, but you have to be realistic, right? You have one shot at this life, right? And you got to make it count, and you can't have any regrets.
Yeah. You know, I think Steve Harvey said, you know, you got to jump in order to spread your wings and learn to fly.
We're closing it on a Steve Harvey note.
I love Steve Harvey, man. He's funny, dude.
Is it weird, dude? I mean, Family Feud for us, man. Like late night Family Feud is his facial reactions and just watching him. So, are you a Harvey with mustache or without mustache guy?
I like his
Are you
clean
weirded
cut.
out without the mustache?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind either, but I like a clean cut myself.
All right, man.
Hey, Adam, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. You got any closing notes?
Dude, just again, thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. If anybody out there is listening and, you're looking, for some career advice, looking for interview tips, certainly, follow along. Whenever I have the time, I'm more than happy to connect with folks and help out where I can. We're all in this together and we got to help each other out.
Amen, brother. Peace out, guys.
Cool, and listen, have a great trip to Dubai, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.